Hey guys, welcome back to Tillie's in Bottle. Today we're going to talk about building a slow speed grinder. Sorry. As I'm sure many of you have noticed, my machine looks a lot like the one that Dale Derry from Metal Tips and Tricks builds in his very popular video. And that's because most of the design of it comes from his, but also because there's really not that much to it, to the extent where any one machine would look a lot like any of the others. There are plenty of differences, of course, in the specifics about how my machine is built compared to his. And so I would say then that this is my version of his machine. And Dale, if you're watching, thanks a lot. Oh, and make some more videos, please. We love them. There are two things I would like from the clamps we use to constrain the table: to move them by hand without tools, and that they should have some kind of style to them. These were turned by hand, and there will be a separate video on how I made these. What we do with a slow speed grinder, in any case, is mainly grinding carbide. Carbide is too hard to be ground with an ordinary stone on a bench grinder, and even those green silicon carbide wheels are not good enough to get the kind of highly polished surface you need on scraping inserts like this one. I'll be learning to scrape, and so building this grinder is part of the things I'll need in order to get started. Aside from that, I have a lot of these gold painted brazed carbide lathe tools, and like a new chisel, they don't come properly sharpened right out of the box. You'll have to grind them yourself. And no, that's not a 45. This is one of the discs that I'll be using to mount on the grinder once it's finished. This has diamond grit impregnated in it. It's just a steel thin disc. And this one is a 250 grit. I also have a 600 grit and a 3000. I have a little problem in making the plate that will go back of the diamond disc, and that is I don't have any 6-inch stock. I can make it out of this piece of 3/8 plate. I can saw out a square of it and mill it round on the rotary table. That presents its own problem in how to clamp the piece to the table. This is a 10-inch rotary table, and strap clamps, toe clamps won't allow me to clamp a piece that large. My little solution to a little problem is I can drill 2 holes around the center of the plate and mount it straight onto the rotary table at the T-nuts. At the same time, I can solve another task, and that is how to drive the plate. 3/8 plate and a 1/2-inch shaft is not enough material for me to mount it how I'd like. What I can do is I can make a collar to drive it out of this bar. I can drill and tap 2 holes in the end of it at the same spacing that we had for the rotary table mounting, and turn a section behind that down and attach it to the shaft with the taper pin. This backing plate will be surface ground, but I don't want to put a rough hot-rolled surface on the mag chuck without first removing the mill scale. Really, I could have dusted it off with a face mill while it was still on the rotary table, but filing it like I'm doing here is an experiment. We'll see how it behaves when it gets on the grinder. Here's the table. and the underside. Now it's time to make our over-designed trunnions for the table. So far this project didn't have any drawings, but with a part this complicated, there's no way I couldn't get my ideas out on a piece of paper first. This end came out fine, and I thought this was going to be the more difficult end. This end looks pretty rough. It's going to work, and I can, I can save its appearance as well. But I had a lot of trouble with it, let's say. There will be a couple of operations on the shaft. Luckily, I had a good piece of turned, ground, and polished mystery metal. And that it's also machinable. So the collar will be taper pinned to the shaft over there. The end of it will be turned for a screw thread. There will be a keyway cut for the pulley, and then the rest of it just lopped off. This shaft is made of some hard stuff. It wouldn't mill with high-speed steel, although really I could have put a V-block or a jack under the spot where I'm trying to cut this keyway. We have something of a trampoline going on. A carbide cutter did cut it well enough, and the shaft turned out to be only case hardened with the inside in a more machinable state. I turned this to a left-hand thread because I originally didn't consider having the grinder spin in both directions. Really though, the forces on the grinding wheel will never be strong enough to loosen the nut anyway. We've come to a little bit of a turning point in the build, so I thought I'd fill you in on where we are now. The table and the trunnions are not exactly finished, but they're in an operable state now. This arc-shaped groove cut in the trunnion lets us change the angle as well as set the height of the table. And once we get the table to height and an angle that I like, the table itself can be moved in and out to get the right distance from the grinding disc. Here we are again at the completed machine, or quite nearly so. There's still a couple of things I might like to change about it. And I've already added on these braces on the sides to resist the tendency for the table to want to sag down and sort of increase the angle that you're working. Other than that, I'd say the stand is doing well. It puts the table at just the right height for when you're doing your work. And I think the grinder is fitting in well into the grinding room part of the workshop here. It's all the way in the corner, which is as far as it can be from the machine tools that would be more susceptible to the dust it makes, the mill and the lathe. As for the electrical controls on the machine, I have one switch just for turning it on and off, and I have a rocker switch for selecting the direction the grinding disc will go. And I found it helpful to have just an on-off switch because I might be going in one direction and then want to stop and start it back up again in the same direction. As far as the changing direction thing goes, I can pretty much do it on the fly. Once the capacitor kicks out, then I can now go in counterclockwise direction. like I mentioned before, you can look out for another video just on making the handles for the machine here. And anyway, enough yakking, let's really grind something now. All right, that's pretty good. I know it's hard to show highly polished surfaces on video, so I hope you can see that, but this is just what you want for a scraper blade. We've got a nice polish on both flanks of the tool, and a line going pretty much right across the center. I've got a little bit of a facet here, and maybe it's a little larger on the bottom on this side, but we've got definitely a serviceable insert. This is the 3000 grit disc, by the way, so this is the final step in grinding a scraper insert here. I'm really enjoying this machine. Adjusting the angle on the table is very fiddly, but in spite of that, I can deal with it, and it's a real benefit to be able to grind these scraper inserts and my lathe tooling as well. I'm glad to be at the finish line, for now at least, with this project. I know this video's been a little disjointed, but I hope I got to show you just the interesting parts about making this thing. So, thanks for watching. I'll catch you later.